On the morning of October 12, 1945, the lawns of the White House were quiet, almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos that had defined the previous 4 years of global war. Standing there was a thin, soft-spoken corporal from Virginia, his uniform pressed, his posture humble. 16 million Americans had served during World War II. Only 431 would ever receive the Medal of Honor. As President Harry S. Truman placed the medal around Desmond Doss's neck, he did something unusual. He held Doss's hand and did not let go. When the citation ended, Truman looked at him and said, "I'm proud of you. You really deserve this. I consider this a greater honor than being president." Those words captured a truth few could deny. The man standing there had faced one of the most brutal battlefields in human history without firing a single shot, without carrying a weapon, and without taking a life. And yet, he had saved more American soldiers than most armed men ever would. Desmond Doss did not look like a warrior. He did not speak like one. He did not think like one. He was born and raised in rural Virginia, growing up in a modest home where faith was not a Sunday habit, but a daily foundation. From an early age, Desmond was deeply shaped by the Bible. One image, in particular, stayed with him for life. His father once brought home a framed illustration of the Ten Commandments. Next to the words, "Thou shalt not kill," was a vivid image of Cain standing over the body of his brother Abel. As a child, Desmond would stare at that picture and ask himself how a brother could take the life of another. To him, the commandment was not symbolic or negotiable. It was personal. In his heart, he believed that if he truly loved God, he could never take a human life. When the United States was thrust into World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Desmond was working at the Newport News Naval Shipyard. He had options. He could have stayed where he was, contributing to the war effort safely from home. He could have requested a deferment. But something inside him would not allow that. He believed deeply in freedom, in responsibility, and in service. He wanted to stand with his country, even if it meant risking everything. On April 1, 1942, Desmond Doss joined the United States Army, fully aware that his beliefs would set him apart, and likely against, the very institution he was entering. From the beginning, Desmond made his position clear. He would serve, but he would not carry a gun. He requested assignment as a combat medic, believing this role would allow him to serve faithfully without violating his conscience. The Army accepted him as a conscientious objector, but fate had other plans. Desmond was assigned to an infantry rifle company, a place where every man was expected to fight, kill, and survive. Almost immediately, he became a target. To his fellow soldiers, Desmond was a contradiction they could not understand. A soldier who refused to carry a weapon was seen as dangerous, not brave. They believed that if the enemy attacked, Desmond would be a liability, someone who would not fight back, someone they would have to protect. They mocked him relentlessly, cursed at him, and isolated him. In the barracks, he was called names that questioned his courage, his sanity, and even his loyalty. One soldier warned him bluntly, "Doss, as soon as we get into combat, I'll make sure you don't come back alive." The officers were no kinder. They saw Desmond as a problem that needed to be solved. They assigned him the hardest duties, hoping he would quit. They scolded him publicly, tried to intimidate him, and even declared him mentally unfit for service. When none of that worked, they attempted to court-martial him for refusing a direct order to carry a weapon. But every attempt failed. The regulations protected him. And more importantly, Desmond refused to break. He believed his duty was to obey God first and serve his country second, and he would not compromise either. Adding to the tension was another conviction Desmond held just as firmly. As a Seventh-day Adventist, he observed the Sabbath on Saturday. He requested permission to attend church every week. To his commanders, it was another inconvenience. To his fellow soldiers, it was further proof that he did not belong. He became more isolated than ever, a quiet, Bible-reading medic in an army built on aggression and force. Yet, over time, something began to change. During grueling marches, when soldiers' feet blistered and cracked, Desmond knew how to treat them. When men collapsed from heat exhaustion, he was the first to kneel beside them, offering his own water. He never responded to insults with anger. He never held grudges. He treated everyone, especially those who mistreated him, with patience and kindness. Slowly, The men around him began to realize something unsettling. This man they had mocked was not weak. He was strong in a way they had never seen before. That quiet strength would soon be tested beyond imagination. Desmond saw combat on Guam and Leyte, where he ran headlong into gunfire to reach wounded men. When bullets tore through the air and shells exploded nearby, he did not hesitate. When someone cried out for a medic, Desmond moved forward, not back. He treated wounds while lying exposed, often so close to enemy positions that he could hear Japanese soldiers speaking nearby. While others took life, Desmond dedicated himself to saving it. But nothing could prepare him, or anyone, for Okinawa. By 1945, Okinawa had become the final gateway to Japan. The Japanese forces defending it were fighting with absolute resolve, knowing there would be no retreat. At the center of this defense stood the Maeda Escarpment, a towering, jagged cliff face the American soldiers grimly nicknamed Hacksaw Ridge. Scaling it required climbing nearly straight up under enemy fire. Holding it meant enduring relentless counterattacks from hidden positions carved into the rock. When Desmond's unit finally reached the top, the battlefield erupted. Japanese forces surged forward in a sudden, violent counterattack. Chaos swallowed the ridge. Officers ordered an immediate retreat. Men ran for the edge of the cliff, desperate to escape. As they descended, many were hit. Others lay wounded, screaming, unable to move. When the smoke cleared, less than 1/3 of the company had made it down safely. The rest were scattered across the ridge, abandoned on enemy-held ground. All but one man retreated. Desmond Doss stayed. Against orders, without a weapon, with enemy fire raining down around him, Desmond ran back into the chaos. He moved from body to body, treating wounds, whispering words of comfort, dragging broken men toward the edge of the cliff. One by one, he tied them into a rope sling and lowered them hundreds of feet down to safety. Each time he finished, he knelt and prayed the same quiet prayer. "Lord, help me get one more." Hours passed. Darkness fell. The firing never stopped. Still, Desmond continued. He was exhausted, bleeding, surrounded by death. Yet he refused to leave. By the end of that Sabbath day, May 5, 1945, Desmond Doss had saved at least 75 American lives. 75 men who would have died alone on that ridge lived because one man refused to abandon them. The battle for Okinawa continued. Days later, during a night assault, a Japanese grenade landed at Desmond's feet. The explosion tore into his leg and hip, sending him flying. He treated his own wounds as best he could and waited. When medics arrived, he refused evacuation until another wounded soldier was treated first. As he was finally being carried away, a sniper's bullet shattered his arm. Even then, he fashioned a splint and crawled towards safety. Desmond Doss's war was over. In October 1945, he stood before the President of the United States as the first conscientious objector in American history to receive the Medal of Honor. He received it not for killing, but for saving. Not for force, but for faith. Not for hatred of the enemy, but for love of his fellow soldiers. The war left him permanently scarred. Tuberculosis consumed his health. 1 lung and 5 ribs were removed. He spent years in hospitals, surviving on a single lung until it finally failed. On March 23, 2006, at the age of 87, Desmond Thomas Doss passed away. He was laid to rest at the National Cemetery in Chattanooga, Tennessee, among the soldiers he once saved. Desmond Doss proved that heroism is not defined by the weapon you carry, but by the values you refuse to abandon. In a war built on destruction, he chose mercy. In a battlefield defined by death, he chose life. His story is not just one of American military history. It is a reminder that even in humanity's darkest hours, courage can take a different form, and faith can change the course of history.